So this is the KhoodeelaarTV television channel being broadcast only on the internet. And this is part A. On Wednesday, the 3rd of November, 2021. And this is just after 0900 hours GMT. And the coincidence is that the same time is the official time in the UK. The GMT and the British so-called standard time are the same. Now, the Times, controlled and owned by Rupert Dirty Digger Murdoch, has got another promotion on page 1 for Boris Johnson at the COP26 parade staged in Glasgow. And the shameless lying criminals of the Times shamelessly promote Johnson's image. And this is a paragraph which we focus on. However, Johnson, who, along with other world leaders, left Glasgow last night, it doesn't say how Johnson was traveling. And then here is the emphasis, struck a more optimistic tone. It's Johnson striking an optimistic tone. Suggesting that China could be persuaded to go further and bring forward the date that its carbon emissions would peak. That's a complete, absolute rubbish. That is rubbish, and the quote is typical lying, congenital lying, stupid, untruthful, useless Johnson statement. I think that what you are starting to see here at COP26 in Glasgow is a sense of how actually you can deliver those cuts in CO2, but there is a long way to go. What a stupid statement. I mean, it doesn't take Johnson to say an idiotic thing like that. And it doesn't have any reference to how the actual reduction in the lethal emissions, how it will be administered anywhere, China, in Glasgow, anywhere else in the world. And there is the contradiction, because in the case of China, the language that Johnson is using is persuading China. And in the continuing lying against France, the tabloids are saying that there will be no compromise. Tabloids, read for tabloids, the Fleet Street tabloids. As Boris Johnson plugging lying scum. It says on page 2 of the Daily Mail, there will be no concessions in fish war. I mean, the defiance, no confessions. No concessions in fish war. There is a picture of India's Narendra Modi walking with Johnson, and the caption in the daily, stupid Daily Mail, the Prime Minister leads India's Narendra Modi through the hall. Why should Boris Johnson be given that credit? Can't Modi walk? And there are absolute lies and contradictions and stupidities that fill the Daily Mail. The liar, Jeff Bezos, is reported as having said that his space adventure was a wake-up call for the ecology. There is no bound, there is no limit to the idiocies. And then on page 21, the Daily Mail says the Channel migrant toll this year has already hit 20,000. And the shock figure is more than double total for 2020. And here is the newspaper, so-called, that is giving, it's like a season, like a week of propaganda for Salma Hayek. Now, in the piece that The Guardian has published, promoting Salma Hayek, the Guardian piece by Hadley Freeman, who herself claims to have been a target or victim of Harvey Weinstein, carries a statement by Salma Hayek that includes the list of all the kind of sexual suggestions made by Harvey Weinstein, according to Salma Hayek. And the question that raises, I mean, if that is true, and let's assume that Salma Hayek is not inventing anything, that Harvey Weinstein did make those suggestions, then why on earth was she staying, doing any business with him? Because it obviously, all the suggestions obviously didn't take place in one day or 1 week or even 1 year, that it took place over a period of time that stretched beyond a year. So why did Salma Hayek stay in business with Weinstein? And the second question that arises from the piece by Hadley Freeman, carried by The Guardian, which is that according to the kind of oozing promotion that the Hadley Freeman bylined piece is, it says that Salma Hayek has got homes around the world. She has got homes more than one location in the USA, and then she has got home, at least one home in the UK. And let's check the contents of the Hadley Freeman promotion in the Guardian for Salma Hayek. So it's a time there in the Guardian. It says the posting time was 3 hours ago. So this being the time, 09:14 GMT, so 3 hours ago would be just after 6. And according to this piece, it's a G2 interview with Salma Hayek. Salma Hayek Weinstein would scream at me, "I didn't hire you to look ugly." The actor talks about being bullied by the disgraced movie mogul, marrying a billionaire, and becoming a superhero at 55. So that was 600 hours GMT. And here is the beginning, the first paragraph. Salma Hayek is dreadfully jet-lagged, which is one of the perils of having homes around the world, and frequently hopping between them. You don't hop from one continent to another. It's a long haul, it's not hopping. Stupid imagery. Let me tell you about my craziness, she says, by video chat from her home in West London. I'm here for less than a week. Then I go back to the US for 5 days for my husband's work. Then I come back here for my work. Then I go back to LA because I'm getting a star on the Hollywood Boulevard. It's crazy, she says. After this interview, she has a fitting for dresses for various movie premieres. We are just making it up as we go along, she says. In exasperation at her crazy life, despite the craziness, she looks impeccable in a gooky dress. And the Pinault family wealth is estimated at 49 billion. It's crazy. Hayek could have easily opted for the cozy, cosseted life of a mega-rich housewife. And to be honest, there are times when she does sound a bit like one. Her favorite outfits at the moment are Balenciaga dresses. I have 4 that I love, she says. Of course, it helps that her husband owns the brand. Is she allowed to wear brands that aren't owned by her husband? I'm allowed to do whatever I want, she says. With mock indignation, although she hears it's just easier to buy the Kering brands. They know me there. Now, the point about this paragraph, the first paragraph about her hopping from one home to another, is disgraceful and insulting to the movement against climate change. She doesn't have to hop. She doesn't have to travel by plane because she has to travel by plane. She can't travel by sea, by ship. That will take ages. So the whole idea of her, Salma Hayek, being promoted as brazenly ignoring the impact that her traveling on the planes has adverse impact on the environment is part of the stupidity of the Guardian. And if the Guardian is that stupid and corrupt and in denial, then the rest of Fleet Street is even worse. And a similar kind of oozing promotion piece for her, Salma Hayek, of course, appears on these 2 pages of the I newspaper, which is corrupt to the core. And it's not something that is bothering the editor and the kind of person that is doing the interview with her. And it says the Salma Hayek on Eternals and House of Gucci. In Hollywood, you can't say exactly what you think. And this is not a piece that and this piece in the Eye by Mortram is not different. It's oozing. And it doesn't recognize, it doesn't refer to this one. It doesn't refer to the environment and the contribution to the climate change that she is making. But on the right of that 2-page spread on page 39 is the reference to a film that has got emotional toll of climate change as the main theme. So there is no actual consideration about the impact of the behavior of these people like Salma Hayek on the environment. And behavior is the main thing that is at the center of the lying propaganda for Johnson et al. That we have been talking about and we have been world exclusively diagnosing and asserting. That after the propaganda about Glasgow is complete, the propaganda in the sense that when it officially ends, that is when I mean what I mean by complete. There will be nothing in the papers or the media, as there has been nothing for decades in the mainstream media about the daily destruction of vital parts of the planet, vital parts of the forests, and vital parts of the atmosphere around the planet, around the globe. And where do you go? Because the United Nations is a bureaucracy. It was not founded to be a bureaucracy, but it is a bureaucracy. And it's the United Nations that has actually organized this summit, COP26. And judging by the contents of the corrupt Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, who is a former Prime Minister of Portugal and whose Wikipedia entry is corruptly kind of full of praise for him while he was actively a Portuguese politician in Portugal. There is nothing in the gap to fill the gap. The United Nations continues as a bureaucracy, and the individual states, including the ones that are described as superpowers and all the rest of it, carry on as usual. And India will carry on as usual. That is an example because 50 years, I mean, this is beyond ridiculous. 50 years is more than one generation. And there will be generations whose lives will be destroyed, literally destroyed by the disease. And the planet itself will be destroyed. 50 years. That shows the attitude towards India. Remember, in April, I think it was Johnson who had to be kind of forced to cancel the March or April this year. Johnson had to be forced to cancel his trip to India. He had to be forced by the open warning that India was experiencing serious increase in the COVID virus, the Indian virus. So there is a big thing about Johnson, and there is a big thing about any British imperialist to take an attitude, a soft line towards the Indian regime as opposed to Indian people. And the Daily Mail has got this picture of Johnson. This is the picture of Johnson. I mean, obviously, even Johnson is taller than Modi, so it shows the physically diminutive kind of stature of Modi. And the Mail says that Modi is being led. Modi is being led by Johnson through the hall. Now there is only a comparison with New Zealand, the deal with New Zealand, and the deal with Australia, and the deal with... These are fantasy deals. Nothing, no kind of deal that Johnson can make or anyone can make with India can compensate for the loss of proximity, loss of value in terms of the goods that could be imported from countries in the European Union. And Johnson is now essentially, although it is not admitted by the British so-called newspapers, the Fleet Street papers, most certainly not admitted by the lying Daily Mail or the Murdoch papers, the Scum, or the Times, or the bribing Boris Johnson graph, which is otherwise known as the Telegraph. Johnson is now struggling, despite the fact that he has got the numerical majority in the House of Commons, members of Parliament, Conservative majority about 80. Essentially, Johnson is now caught in a serial crisis caused by the lies that he confected and retailed in support of Brexit. Because it's a standstill. Brexit is producing consistently negative outcome and consequences. So Johnson is running out. In fact, he has run out of excuses. And he cannot be relying on the reserve of unexplored stunts. What can he say? Apart from having a go at France about the fishing, which is an artificial crisis, Johnson cannot really have a go at, let's say, Germany or Spain or Italy or Greece. These are all European Union members, or Poland. In fact, Johnson is tempted to overhype the Polish kind of standoff with the European Union because of the Polish right-wing regime imitating Brexit and issuing threats that are disguised as credible as Brexit. But Poland's economy and Poland's need to receive the support of the membership that the membership of the European Union gives is very different. And so Poland cannot afford the kind of adventure that Johnson and Farage and other liars were able to do. But that has gone. Farage has vanished because Farage cannot deliver the compensation that Brexit has caused to the British consumer and the market. And the Sainsbury's, one of the biggest supermarkets chains that people depend on for their shopping and their, is experiencing depleting store. I mean, the goods, the shelves are getting emptier in Sainsbury's. So there will be hunger. There will be starvation on a wider scale. Food shortage will mean hunger. And when that happens in a way that actually bites more people than it has done so far, as at today's date, no amount of lying and inventive lying by Johnson or for him by the Daily Mail and the Scum and the Times and the daily bribing Boris Graf and the Bieber book Corruption and Toxicity, the Daily Express Group. None of the lies will stand. And Boris Johnson will be ousted faster. Boris Johnson will be ousted faster than anyone in Fleet Street has so far admitted as possible. And here is a piece by the Daily Mail. Their political editor, Jason Groves. The heading is Rishi, that is the finance minister. We will force UK's giant farms to go green. That is absolute lie. They will not force the giant farms to go green. Why? For a start, the giant farms own the Conservative Party. And the Conservative Party exists as the government machine for promoting the agenda of the giant farms. So the Daily Mail is lying. It is saying there that Rishi says that the cons will force the giant farms to go green. The threat to the environment, the attacks on the environment have not just happened in the last week. They've been happening for decades. And there is no evidence that Rishi or anybody else in the Conservative Party, the scum party, has any respect for the scientific and the environmentally active campaigners' opinion whatsoever. And they're promoting on 2 pages the very company that owns Boris Johnson, the JCB. So it's completely corrupt, literally corrupt, the Daily Mail. Page after page of lying and contradictions. And every contradiction is accompanied by twice or 3 times the amount of contradiction, 3 times or 4 times promotion, propaganda, an endorsement for the liar, Boris Johnson. That's what is happening. And the Daily Mail is actually promoting this JCB, which is the company that Boris Johnson colluded with during the run-up to the propaganda for the 2019 election. And there is a heading in the, or subheading. Heading and the subheading on the 2-page spread on pages 6 and 7, which is misleading, typically misleading. There is no factual, evidential, let alone moral or ethical consistency in anything that any of the titles in Fleet Street publishes. And there is a kind of reluctant admission by the Financial Crimes about the banks lying about the environmental pledge. It says that banks have been diluting. Banks are under fire for diluting green pledges since Paris Climate Accord. Now, Paris Climate Accord took place several years ago. Now, if we take the example of that as a reliable indication of what will happen after the COP26 staged at Glasgow. Remember, when we say staged, we say fabricated. It's not honest. It's not really genuine. So that's why the word staged. It's not staged like being physically held. We say it's a propaganda exercise. So if we take the banks diluting the green pledges since Paris Climate Accord, then we can see that that is what is going to happen about the Glasgow COP26. And the reason for that is not far from the bureaucratic constitution and the role and behavior of the United Nations organization. Because instead of being active in holding governments to account, states to account, United Nations member states to account, and big business around the world to account, which is what the United Nations should have been doing. And if you look at the founding statements and declarations of the United Nations, you can see that that is what it should have been doing, the United Nations. But that's not what the United Nations is doing or has been doing. Not only that, all the world's media, so-called media, including The Guardian and others, which kind of partially pretend to be concerned about the climate, not the Daily Mail, not the Sun, not the Scum, not the Times, not the daily bribing Boris Crumb, but the others like the Guardian and some of the world's largest news trading organizations like Reuters, like the Associated Press, like the AFP. They have not been monitoring the United Nations. They have not been monitoring the United Nations, and they have not been asking questions about the need to change the United Nations from being a bureaucracy to an actual monitor of the world member states, which is how the climate change emergency has been caused, which is what has caused the climate crisis. Why? Because the United Nations hasn't been causing United Nations member states to actually deliver sustainable behavior by every state, every government, every business, every society on the planet. If that had happened even over the last 50 years, well, 50 years since Doug Hammarskjöld was murdered, assassinated, then the planet would be experiencing a different level of climate, different level of heat. 50 years, a different level of heat. Because taking into account every single year's emissions and heating up the planet, you can take the example, whatever the actual level, I'm not looking at the data as I speak, but every single year, the planet is heating up, getting hotter. So if you add together 50 years, 60 years, 70 years since 7 decades since the United Nations was, let's say, founded effectively, then the level of heat on the surface of the planet would have been 70 years less, let's say. But that is not what the United Nations has been working on. If you look at the social media posts in the name of António Guterres, the Secretary General, the Portuguese former Prime Minister, you can see that the guy is absolutely pathetic. He's parading stupidities and inanities. What I'm saying is that instead of inanities and stupidities, those posts should actually give the data about the behavior of the big businesses, the big polluter countries, and the big polluting kind of failures and negligence. That is the least the United Nations could be doing. And I'm saying that it must not waste a moment before it starts doing what I'm saying it should be doing. And the United Nations is actually allowing polluting liars like Boris Johnson to distract and divert attention from the task that the planet needs. I mean, Johnson is a congenital liar. Doesn't mean that he's really fully engaged mentally, intellectually in the cause and effect of the various things that are being done that destroy the environment in the particular part of the planet, particular island, let's say. Fish war. I mean, it's totally diverting the attention of the entire Little England, entire parliament, the entire media, entire public. And there is no evidence that the environment is going to be defended by any group of campaigners dedicated to stopping the destruction and the destructive behavior. Campaigners in the UK, let's say. Why? For a start, there is a hostility, the climate of hostility that has been fueled against even the slightest sign of action. The hateful propaganda and the provocation and the incitement to propaganda and promotion of hatred against the Insulate Britain campaigners is a tip of the iceberg, is a symbol of how hostile Fleet Street is to any action against climate change. And Johnson himself is part of the haters, inciters of hatred against campaigners. So not only is the Times wrong in saying that, which is what I started by reading, Johnson, who along with other world leaders left Glasgow last night, struck a more optimistic tone. That's completely the opposite of what Johnson has done, has been doing, and will be doing. Johnson will be supporting attacks on campaigners. That's what he will be doing. So Johnson is not only being wrongly painted as a defender of the environment, he's actually engaged in violent attacks on the campaigners. And the campaigners' number and the impact of the campaigners in Britain is very small. And there is nothing. If you take away those very small number of the campaigners, then there is no action for sustainable environment in Britain. So the heat will continue to be generated where the heat should be drastically reduced by allowing not only campaigns on the road, but allowing arguments against wasting and destroying the environment. For example, one thing we have been saying about the HS2 is this, that the HS2 has been causing destruction of the forests and the environment, and millions of creatures have been murdered, massacred. And the other thing is that historically and personally and continually, Boris Johnson is part of the attacks on the environment, murderous attacks like the hunt. Hunting foxes is not only just a factual crime against the environment, against the animals, but is also symbolic and representative of the other policies that Johnson actually fronts in attacking the environment. For example, yesterday on the LBC radio, there was an interview with George Injustice Eustace. The interview was with Nick Ferrari of the LBC. And yesterday was the day after the actual formal parade stating that the COVID-26 participants had agreed certain measures, which is what the Times is promoting. George Injustice Eustace, who fronts the corrupt, murderous, depraved DEFRA department in the Johnson-fronted cabal called government. Eustace boasted that HS2 was going to go ahead. By that, he was supporting the attacks on the environment, the murders and massacres of the animals, and the destruction of the trees on the route from Euston in London to Birmingham on the Midlands, the HS2. And it is only the LBC presenter and the LBC organization that has actually pointed out that Eustace, injustice, depraved DEFRA, these are our words, not LBC's words, but effectively we are using the LBC facts of the contents of the statements issued by LBC. That Eustace was ignoring the COP26 and was boastfully bragging and boasting of the policy of destruction of the environment under the pretext of doing the HS2. The HS2 is a high-speed rail. And let's put it this way. The argument for high speed, which is the center of the scheme, is completely false. There is no reason why a few minutes, let's say the journey by train, HS2, theoretically, and when operational, the train journey, either way, from Euston in London to the Midlands, Birmingham is the central location, central destination. If the train journey, quote, saves 30 minutes, I mean, what is it for? What is the 30 minutes about? How will 30 minutes, the difference in traveling traveling time, 30 minutes. How will that affect the economy or affect the person? It will not be productive and it will not produce anything. So that is a completely false argument, and it should be nailed, and it should be actually used to scrap the HS2. And the argument about HS2 being justifiably continued by killing trees and murdering the creatures is an intentional criminality against the truth, against the accountable duty owed to the environment, to the society, to the affected targets by every government department, every government decision maker, as we have been seeing in the intentional criminal, unnecessary lying outrage committed against the baby angel Geronimo. Baby angel Geronimo is on the top right of this screen when you see it. And baby angel Geronimo has been the best, let's say, in the best health and most healthy creature known. And against that fact, the depraved DEFRA has for 4 years plus has continued to conspire to find any kind of excuse and pretext to misrepresent the best health of the baby angel Geronimo as being a disease. Think about that. So it's insanity. It's darkness. It's evil regime. So that is the regime that is directly intervening immediately within hours of the copied declaration or agreement or pledge, and saying that the lies and the lying against baby angel Geronimo are justified against the rest of the environment under the pretext of HS2. So what we are looking at is the Fleet Street role, the media. If we shift our attention away from the media, radio, print, television, and if we go to the Palace of Westminster, which is supposed to be the model of democratic parliaments, what is the Palace of Westminster, the House of Commons, actually doing, actually delivering for democracy, for accountability, for holding the government, the regime, to account? Nothing. We have said that in the previous broadcasts, so we shall refer to that in short at this moment, at this point. We shall return to this theme and the topic for further detailed updates later in due course. So what we can now look at is the front page of the Daily Mail. And the Daily Mail says, how low can the Met go? Met is not meteorological, it's metropolitan. Metropolitan Police, which is also known as Scotland Yard. So let's read the first paragraph of this. And it says, Cressida Dick was last night told to get the rat out of Scotland Yard after two officers admitted sharing photos of murdered sisters. Now, the murdered sisters are the two sisters who were murdered by this alleged Satanist, the devil worshipping or devil prompted murderer of Sudanese or North African origin with a Muslim name, who murdered the two sisters in northwest London. So the mother of the victims, Mina Smallman, said the police chief must carry the can for her force's failings. In the latest scandal to hit the Metropolitan Police, the police sent sickening crime scene pictures of Mina Smallman's daughters' bloodied bodies to colleagues and big civilians. One of the pair even superimposed his face on one of the images of the women who had been murdered by a devil-worshipping stranger only hours earlier. So the policeman is named Dennis Jaffa, 47. Now the Jaffa, again, kind of invokes an Arabic or Arabic-based name. So he could be the son of a mixed ethnic background parents. One could be a Persian or an Arab or Pakistani or Afghan or even Indian Muslim father and possibly a mother from another background. Why I'm saying that? Because the pictures of him suggest that he's lighter skinned than he would be if he were the son of a mixed parentage involving black African parent and a white European parent. So this Jaffa doesn't immediately look like he's of mixed parentage, but his name gives the clue that he is of mixed parentage. Pigmentationally on the skin color, he looks like another white person. So it suggests that his mixed parentage could be either Pakistani and European, or Persian and European, or Arabic and European. When these are the mixtures, the child doesn't look any different in terms of skin color from the skin color of a child from two white parents. So this is a quote from a man called Sal Nassim, another Muslim-sounding name, London director of the Independent Office for Police Conduct. He said, a culture where some officers do not see anything wrong with sharing deeply offensive messages, and where others feel unable or unwilling to challenge this, has to change. Of course it has to change. But who is going to make it change? Let's look at this again in the whole. All the evidence that we are looking at, based on the reports contained in the Fleet Street Papers of the behavior of government, all the evidence, government, state, including the Metropolitan Police, because the Metropolitan Police itself politically is supposed to be accountable to the Home Office, which is the Home Office is fronted by Priti Patel. Now, Priti Patel is the daughter of a Hindu kind of couple that were expelled from East Africa in the late 1960s. But although they were expelled, when they settled here, they produced a child such as Priti Patel, who has the outlook of the worst possible anti-Asian, anti-African racist that you could find anywhere in Little England, and you could identify easily as operating within the scum party, Conservative Party. So Priti Patel is not delivering accountable behavior, either by the Home Office or by the agencies that are controlled by the Home Office. And the Metropolitan Police is one very major agency. Then you've got other behavior by Priti Patel's Home Office, which in other countries is called the Interior Ministry. The Domestic Affairs Ministry, let's say. The role that Priti Patel has been playing in demonizing, in the role that she has been playing in demonizing migrants. The role that Priti Patel has been playing in demonizing migrants and asylum seekers has been as bad, as illegal, as unconstitutional, as contrary to the international law, international legal obligations that the UK is under, as anything that Donald Trump said against the Mexicans or other migrants coming from the continent, other parts of the country, of the continent, the American North American continent, let's say. Affected by migrants from South American countries. That's the full statement. Or any other races like in Austria or in Norway or in Germany or in France like Marine Le Pen or her father. So Priti Patel is the daughter of a Hindu couple expelled by the racists in power at the time in Africa, actually behaving as racistly or as with worse hostility against Asian people, African people seeking asylum and trying to migrate to the UK. Now that could not have been possible if the so-called government, of which Priti Patel has been a member in terms of cabinet status, if the government was led by somebody who first of all recognized the international treaty obligations that the UK is under, and secondly, had expressed respectful recognition of the duties that the UK was under. This has not been the case. For example, she has been closely involved with David Cameron, and she has been a member of the cabinet while Theresa May was incumbent as Prime Minister. And she, of course, has been very closely supported by Boris Johnson. So all these three prime ministers in the last 11 years, since May 2010, when the idiotic Gordon Brown allowed the cons to win the election in 2010. All these prime ministers have been racist on the evidence. It's not something I'm inventing. It's on the evidence. And all these prime ministers have been hostile to the obligations that the UK has been under to recognize the rights of the migrants and rights of the asylum seekers. Theresa May was exposed as a consequence of investigation into the behavior of the UK Home Office against the people also known as the Windrush generation. Those people came from the Caribbean in the 1950s. So Theresa May was exposed as being the person in the post of Home Secretary, what Patel is now occupying. The Theresa May was exposed as giving the direction as the incumbent Home Secretary at the time to create a hostile environment against the people, collectively known, generally known as the Windrush people, Windrush generation. So that's racist. That was racist against the people of the Caribbean background being subjected to the hostile environment. But that hostile environment, the hostility, did not stay confined to the targets who were the Caribbean backgrounded people. It extended to all the people from the other backgrounds, mainly Asian and African. The Caribbean ones are mainly of African origin, but they came from the Caribbean. So the fact that they came from the Caribbean did not stop other people from African backgrounds coming directly from Africa, African people coming from Africa. So Patel has been serving three races in post as prime ministers sequentially, serially, let's say, one after the other. And Patel has been directly inciting hatred against the very small number of people that have been able to cross the channel from France into the UK. And Patel has been openly active in fomenting hatred against the asylum seekers crossing the channel by colluding with the two Kent County Council and Surrey County Council, which are the two main county councils that have their boundaries stretching into the sea. So when the asylum seekers on the boats have attempted to land on England, numerically they have had to, because of the geography, land mainly in Surrey County Council or Kent County Council territories. For that reason, Priti Patel has treated the asylum seekers as if they were German or French state-sponsored, state-powered invaders, as opposed to them being absolutely emotionally drained and physically drained, half-starved, semi-starved, people who have lost everything, which is what they are. So she, Priti Patel, has been used to incite the Royal Air Force and the Royal Navy to target these people trying to cross the channel as if they were like German war ships. The little boats were being magnified, demonized into the images of German or French or Spanish armada or something. This is factually stupid and illogical, absolutely stupid and childish. And yet Fleet Street has not admitted that. Not even the Guardian, not even the Daily Mirror, and most certainly not the Communist Party of Great Britain, daily called the Morning Star. We call the Morning Star. Not the BBC, not the Sky News, not the ITV, not Channel 4 News. So if we take that example and extrapolate that along and stand it next to the behavior of the depraved DEFRA against the baby angel Geronimo, we can see two huge exhibitions of defiance of logic, defiance of common sense, defiance of sense of fairness on the part of the UK state. It's not ordinary individuals that are excited or fomented or incited to hate the asylum seeker. It's the actual state engaging in a campaign of war against the baby angel Geronimo and the Home Office in a campaign of war against the asylum seekers. And there has been no recourse. There has been no recourse, there is no legal, there has been no ethical demand or call or claim through the court system. Remember? When David Neuberger, who was the then outgoing first president of the Supreme Court, claimed in July 2017, as reported by the London No Standard, Martin Bentham, on the 4th of July. Neuberger boasted, that was the year after, the calendar year after the Brexit referendum. Neuberger said, and I have to look at this because there is a chance of inaccurate memory. So what David Neuberger was saying, and it was on the 4th of July, that I remember correctly. So that was 4th of July. Martin Bentham wrote on 4th of July 2017. That was the calendar year, second calendar year, or the calendar year following the 2016 calendar year, when the Brexit thing was done. Brexit was staged. Lord Neuberger, the president of the Supreme Court, said that once British judges were left to our own common law devices, they would be able to react more quickly and freely to development in our fast-changing world. He also insisted that Britain's departure from the European Union would in no way undermine London's status as the world center for legal services generally, and dispute resolution in particular, and was instead acting as a spur to further improvements. So Neuberger was reportedly saying that Brexit was serving as a spur. Singling out Labour's 1999 Access to Justice Act as the root of the problem, Neuberger said, "We have a serious problem with access to justice for ordinary citizens and small and medium-sized businesses. If it does not exist, society will eventually start to fragment." Neuberger also warned that it was verging on the hypocritical for governments to have granted rights over recent decades while doing very little to ensure they could be enforced. His most striking comments, however, were on Brexit. Some have wanted that leaving the European Union, some have warned that leaving the European Union could harm London's ability to retain its position as the world's primary center for dispute resolution and lead to reduction in the billions of pounds a year that the capital's legal services generate for the economy. Lord Neuberger, who was speaking in London to Australian lawyers, insisted that any risks could be overcome. He added, "Brexit does not alter the fact that lawyers and judges in the UK are as internationally minded and expert as they ever have been. Brexit is operating as a spur to encourage all involved in the provision of legal services in London to strive to ensure that those services are even better than they already are." Now that's a lie. That is a pack of lies. And although we have factually diagnosed and disposed of and exposed Neuberger as being dishonest and being dishonestly kind of put to service by the then Justice Minister, within quotation marks, David Lidington, to promote the status of the then Prime Minister Theresa May as being as good a Brexiteer as other Brexiteers, because notoriously Theresa May was reported to be one that had actually voted against the UK's exit from the European Union, despite the fact that she was reportedly a anti-Brexiteer. When in position as Prime Minister, she wanted to be reported and to come across as being as Brexiteering as the next Brexiteer. So David Lidington himself reported as having voted to remain in the EU. wanted as the Secretary of State in charge of the court's bureaucracy. There is no such thing as justice. So the Ministry of Justice is a misnomer. Should be the bureaucracy in control, or bureaucracy that is in place to be in control of the court system. Lidington wanted to be coming across as a Brexiteer himself, as did Neuberger himself, because Neuberger had actually presided the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court was involved in at least one major legal challenge against Theresa May's abuse of Parliament, etc., etc. So there is a lot of kind of similarity between the so-called anti-Brexiteering Tories and the Brexiteering Tories. Essentially, these differences are not significant or substantial. For example, the role of the predecessor to Theresa May, David Cameron. Cameron said that he was allowing Brexit, the referendum, to be held because of a claim or a commitment that he had made. That suggested that he was a man of his word, he was a man of principle, he was an ethical, he was a moral person. Of course, he wasn't. He was lying. Now, the fact that he was lying was known to us. We told anyone who was visiting our posts or reading our posts at the time. We've said always, on the evidence, that David Cameron was a liar and a racist. But to the majority of the people, the brainwashed people, the gullibles, the little Englanders, Cameron had to stage a kind of additional event to come across as being ethical and moral, etc., etc. So he resigned. When the Brexit vote turned out to be 52% for the UK's exiting the EU, Cameron resigned. And that resignation brought in Theresa May as the Prime Minister. But despite the fact that she was reportedly against Brexit, her behavior turned out to be as zealous and as fanatic as any self-styled, self-confessed Brexiteer's behavior would have been. And so she engaged David Lidington, de facto her deputy in the House of Commons, to manipulate as many agents to promote the idea that Brexit would be a good thing. And in the judiciary, there was no occupant in a higher position in terms of the bureaucratic kind of tier and hierarchy than David Neuberger. So David Lidington managed to get Neuberger to issue this banal series of advantages promoting the benefits of Brexit. And the lying pretext was provided by the use of the Australian lawyers rallying or assembly gathering in London, which is as rare as you can imagine. So all these manipulations were entertained by the liars in government. And what it shows is that they lie, they don't deliver. And I've said all of these things in order to say that when Boris Johnson allowed the depraved DEFRA to invent a series of lies against BabyAngelGeronimo, Johnson did that in the full knowledge that the judiciary would not hold the government to account, which is what the judiciary, if it were actually independent, would have done and should have done. When the Supreme Court judges kind of did a ritual review of the UK government about the Brexit, the Daily Mail ran a front page scare story painting a number of the Supreme Court judges involved in the forthcoming ruling against Brexit as enemies of the people. The ruling was not really inimical to the people at all, nor was there any evidence that any of the Supreme Court judges or the Court of Appeal judges were in any way describable on the evidence of their conduct throughout their careers as being anything other than patriotic Little Englanders themselves. So when depraved DEFRA attacked BabyAngelGeronimo, there was no sign of any judge at any level of any rank behaving as a separate organ of the state. That is to say, there was no evidence of the separation of powers being exercised by any of the judges against the executive. The executive being represented by depraved, not deprived, depraved DEFRA and its fronter, George Injustice Eustace. And the depraved DEFRA has been serially endorsed, promoted and justified by the liar Boris Johnson. If that was bad enough, then even the so-called official opposition leader, Keir Starmer, backed the depraved DEFRA and backed the congenital liar Boris Johnson. And to this day, there is no record of a single MP raising a single question about the behavior of the depraved DEFRA. So what have I been talking about? These are the facts, current, contemporary facts that show up the Times and the Daily Mail and the scum who are promoting Boris Johnson about COP26. There won't be any implementation of anything that creates a sustainable environment, substantially sustainable and sustained environment in this country. Now there is a kind of token piece in the Daily Mail today. And I say token because 99% of the Daily Mail contents are promoting. 99% of the Daily Mail contents are promoting lies for Boris Johnson, lies for the big business. And here is the piece that is a token piece that I call Ian Birrell. And the main heading is preceded by the subheading, which is a popular colleague, a grieving husband, yes, but Owen Paterson broke rules to lobby for his paymasters and must face the penalty. If members of parliament absolve him today, it would be the demeaning of democracy. Now, this is about the lobbying thing. Let's read the editorial, which is headed, "Have MPs no shame?" That is the Daily Mail. How can politicians expect the trust and respect of the public if they turn a blind eye to egregious wrongdoing by colleagues? That question comes into sharp focus today. MPs will vote on whether to suspend Owen Paterson from the Commons, potentially triggering a by-election. Westminster's anti-sleaze watchdog found the Tory Owen Paterson is guilty of lining his pockets for lobbying ministers on behalf of two companies, a clear breach of the rules. If Mr. Paterson belonged to any other trade or profession, he would almost certainly be looking for a new line of work. Yet his parliamentary pals, that is friends, conservative scum, are striving to overturn the sanction, dubiously claiming he was convicted by a kangaroo court. If they succeed, it will be a slap in the face for democracy. Mr. Patterson says the inquiry contributed to his wife's suicide. We sympathize, but he must face the music. The expenses scandal exposed the greed and arrogance of our political class. Afterwards, they begged voters for forgiveness and promised to change. Closing ranks today would not only prove they remain cliquish, self-interested, and disreputable, but also their flagrant and shameful contempt for the public. Now, this watchdog, the parliamentary watchdog, which has ruled against Owen Paterson, the Conservatives crooked MP. Now, this watchdog is now going to be changed by Boris Johnson. Why? Because it told the truth, at least on that occasion, and found Owen Paterson guilty of misconduct, breaking the rules. So it is this same Boris Johnson that the Times today is hailing. This lying Times piece is praising this liar Boris Johnson. Owen Paterson, depraved DEFRA, attacks, lies, inventions against the BabyAngelGeronimo. And Johnson's dubious attacks on France over the so-called fishing dispute, and Johnson's capitulation to China. There is no way that any significant, sustainable, qualitative improvement for the environment will happen as a result of whatever Johnson-fronted cabal has pledged during the COP26. As the evidence is absolutely Staggering. Okay, so we shall call this edition to an end at 10:38 GMT, Wednesday, the 3rd of November 2021. We shall continue in the next editions